Blizzards bring more than just snow. They bring silence, isolation, and sometimes something far more terrifying. These are 10 chilling true horror stories where the storm wasn't the only thing knocking. It was the winter of either 2013 or 2014. I can't remember exactly, but what I do remember is the blizzard. You know, the kind I'm talking about. One of those full-blown, wide-out snowstorms where the sky gets swallowed in swirling gray. The streets vanish under a thick white blanket, and even the streetlights look like little beacons struggling to cut through the storm. Our town had pretty much shut down, and the schools had already called it. No class tomorrow. Now, for most kids, that was a free pass to binge movies, sip hot cocoa, or just veg out under a pile of blankets. But my buddy Carlos and I, we saw it as an opportunity. See, we had this little tradition every time a big snowstorm hit. Grab our shovels, bundle up like Arctic explorers, and head out to offer our snow clearing services to the neighbors. It was our niche, a little side hustle. We didn't make a fortune or anything, but it usually added up to enough for pizza, snacks, and sometimes even a new video game if we really hit it big. That night, around 8 p.m., we stepped out into the icy chaos, shovels in hand, boots crunching through fresh powder. The wind whipped through the neighborhood like it was alive, howling between houses and tossing snow into our faces. We started going door to door, ringing bells, giving our pitch. Hey, we're clearing sidewalks and driveways. $15 to $40 depending on the size. A lot of people said no. Some just peeked through curtains and didn't even bother answering the door. We were about 3 or 4 houses in before we finally got our first yes. $15 each. Not bad. We cleared the walkway and drive, fast and neat, feeling good about our pace. After that, we got one more house, a bigger one, and they gave us 20 apiece. Things were looking up. Then came the weird one. It was this small corner house. You know how corner properties usually have more sidewalk and longer driveways? More snow to move. But that also meant more money. We rang the doorbell and waited. After a moment, the door creaked open, just a crack. Nobody peeked out. No eye peering through the gap. Just a deep voice from the other side. "Who's there?" the voice asked. It wasn't angry or aggressive, just hollow, like someone speaking through a hallway or into a paper bag. I gave the same pitch I'd given a dozen times already. "Hey, we're clearing snow. Your corner lot's a big one, so $40 would be the price." There was this short silence. Then, "Oh yes, yes please. 40 is fine." There was something off about the way he said it. Like he was surprised we'd even offered or nervous. But hey, money's money, right? I turned to Carlos, gave him a shrug, and we got to work. I took the front porch and walkway. Carlos started on the sidewalk along the street. The wind was picking up, and snow was falling faster now, piling up as soon as we cleared a section. I found myself glancing up at the house a lot. It was dark inside. Not a single light on, which I thought was weird. I figured maybe he just didn't like wasting electricity or something. But then I noticed him. There he was, standing at the window, just watching me. I couldn't make out his face. The room behind him was pitch black. But I could see his shape, the outline of his head and shoulders. It made me nervous, but I tried to shrug it off. I focused on my work, but every now and then I'd glance up and yep, still there. Standing completely still, staring. Carlos finished up his part around the same time I did, and we started heading back to the porch to knock and collect our cash. But before we even got close, the door creaked open again, and the voice barked out, "Go around back." We stopped in our tracks, looking at each other. Did he just say? I started. Carlos nodded. Yeah, around back. We weren't sure what to do, but for some reason we listened. Maybe it was the cold, maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe we were just dumb kids who wanted our $40. We trudged through the side yard, the snow up to our knees now. The backyard was small, fenced in, with a shed in one corner and a little awning near the back door. We stood under it to shake off the snow and wait. But nothing happened. No one opened the door. A minute passed, maybe two.
Inuka, no durvell.
Still nothing. Then, a window cracked open just above us and the voice returned. This time quieter, almost inviting. Come inside. I'm counting your money on the table. I looked at Carlos. He looked at me. Something inside me screamed no. But instead I said, all right, and I pushed the door open. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. Every light in the house was off. Not dimmed, off. Pitch black. We could barely see a few feet in front of us. We stepped into what felt like a living room, our boots soaking into the carpet. The only light came from a street lamp shining through a tiny slit in the window. Hello, I called out. I'm in the kitchen, counting your money. The voice came from the left, through a narrow door. We shuffled closer. I reached the doorway trying to peer in, but I couldn't see anything, because the guy was standing right there, pressed up against the other side, staring through the same tiny crack. I only saw him for a second, his eye pale and wide, watching me through the gap. I yanked back immediately. We forgot something outside, I blurted, grabbing Carlos's arm. We turned and made our way out, quickly but calmly. No reply from the man. Once we were outside, though, we bolted, grabbed our shovels and ran. We didn't stop until we reached my backyard. Threw the shovels into the shed and went straight inside. I was shaking. Carlos was pale. We flopped onto the couch in my basement, trying to process what just happened. After a while, Carlos stood up. I'm gonna grab my shovel. I nodded. Cool. Be careful. Not 30 seconds later, he came back inside, eyes wide. Dude, he whispered. Come see this. We went outside. The snow was still falling, but fresh footprints stood out clearly in the yard. One set mine went to the shed, but there was another set, a second trail, from the backyard gate to the shed and back. Someone had been in our yard. That's not mine, Carlos said. We followed the trail with our eyes. Whoever it was had been walking right behind our house after we got back. Carlos ran inside. We told my mom everything, and to her credit, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed the phone and called 911. The cops actually showed up pretty fast, which was surprising considering the weather. They checked the yard, followed the tracks, and opened the shed. That's when they found him. The same man, the guy from the dark house, huddled behind our lawn mower, half covered in snow. He was wearing the same clothes I'd glimpsed through the window earlier, tattered flannel shirt, work boots, and he was drunk, like really drunk. Later, the police told us he admitted, while slurring his words, that he'd planned to break into the house after we all went to bed. But when they asked why, he didn't say. He just stared at the floor. That night still keeps me up sometimes. I think about what would have happened if we'd stayed in that house a few minutes longer. If we'd walked into that kitchen instead of turning around. If we'd gone to sleep, not realizing someone was crouched in our shed. It was supposed to be a simple snow shoveling gig. Instead, it turned into the creepiest night of my life. It was one of those early December nights when the snow falls heavy and steady, muffling the world in a kind of cold silence. I remember it perfectly because it was the first real storm of the year. Thick snowflakes were tumbling from the sky like feathers, piling up fast, and everything outside looked like a snow globe had been shaken up real good. Inside, I was warm, cozy, and posted up in my room, watching this really low-budget Christmas horror movie on TV. The kind that's so bad it's entertaining. You know, the kind, cheesy acting, fake blood, but still weirdly watchable. I was texting in this group chat I had with my friends George and Pat. Just typical random stuff, memes, what we were doing, snow day rumors. Everything felt normal. Until it didn't. I swear I felt it before I heard it. This drop in my stomach, like my body knew something was off before my brain could catch up. Then came the sound. A hard thud against my bedroom window. Loud and sudden. I froze. My room is on the ground floor and that window, it's right beside my bed. So hearing something slam against it out of nowhere? Yeah, not fun. I jumped up, walked over, and peeked out the curtain. Nothing. Just a white blur of falling snow. I was still staring when another thwack hit the glass. I jumped again. This time I saw it, a snowball. Someone was chucking snowballs at my window. Now, my first thought? George and Pat. Those idiots were probably out there being dumb. It wouldn't be the first time they pulled some prank. So I stood on my bed, trying to get a better view out the window. But even with the porch light on, I couldn't see anyone. So I did what any dumb teen would do. I slid the window open and called out, "Really, guys?" For a second, nothing. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, came a laugh. But it wasn't the kind of laugh I expected. It wasn't high-pitched or goofy like George or Pat's. This laugh was deep, like grown man deep. The kind of laugh that doesn't sound playful, it sounds wrong. Too calm. Too steady. I closed the window instantly and locked it tight. Then I started texting the group chat. "Okay, real funny. You got me. Now answer your phones." No reply. I waited a couple minutes, staring out the window. Then another snowball hit. I jumped again and yanked the curtain to the side, and that's when I saw him. Standing in the snow right outside my window was a man. He wasn't dressed like one of my friends. He wasn't even dressed like someone goofing off. He had on a black beanie pulled low, a long black winter coat, and thick gloves. He was just standing there, smiling, waving. I slammed the curtain shut and backed away from the window. My hands were shaking. I picked up my phone and saw my friends had finally responded. "George? Pat? What are you talking about?" Neither of them had any idea what I was referring to. That made my stomach twist even more. Then came a knock.
Top. Top. Top.
It was him. At the window. Again. This time, the knock was followed by something worse. I heard the faint sound of the window lock being jiggled, like he was trying to lift it open. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, frozen. And then, silence. For maybe a full minute I stood still, listening. Nothing. I slowly crept to the window and pulled the curtain back just a sliver. Gone. The snow was falling heavier now, but I could see the footprints. Deep, fresh ones leading away from the house. I didn't even think twice. I bolted out of my room and ran to get my parents. My mom was half asleep on the couch. My dad was still awake in the kitchen. I told them everything. My dad didn't even laugh or shrug it off. He took one look outside at the footprints and nodded. Yeah, someone was definitely out there. He didn't call the cops, though. He figured whoever it was had taken off and wouldn't be back. Just in case, he turned on all the outside lights and told me to stay in my room with the window locked tight. And that's exactly what I did. Back in my room, I turned off the lights and got back into bed. I wasn't watching the movie anymore, though. I just had it playing in the background while I stared at my door, wide-eyed and tense. That's when the door creaked open. Not a lot, just an inch or two. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was my little brother messing around. So I snapped, "Get out." The door slowly closed again. I waited, expecting to hear his footsteps retreating down the hall. But I didn't. Instead, I kept hearing the movie. And then, a click. The floorboard next to my bed. That's when I turned. And what I saw almost stopped my heart. Standing just inside my room, near the edge of my bed, was him. The man from outside. He was waving at me again. Same black coat. Same beanie. Same gloves. He slowly lifted one finger to his lips and made a SHHHH motion. I couldn't even scream. My voice caught in my throat. Then he lunged forward. Before I could move, he was on top of me. His gloved hand clamped over my mouth, and in his hand was a small white towel. I don't know what was on it, but it smelled chemical, strong, like some kind of drug. My whole body started going numb as he pressed it against my face. I struggled. I tried to scream, but everything started going black. The last thing I remember was the sound of my dad's voice shouting. And then, darkness. I woke up in the living room, lying on the floor. My mom and dad were there, panicked. 2 police officers were standing nearby, and there were flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the walls. An ambulance had pulled up outside. Apparently, my dad had heard the noise and rushed in just in time. He caught the guy, physically pulled him off me, but the guy broke free, sprinted out the front door, and vanished into the snowstorm. The cops searched, but they couldn't find him. He was just gone. Later, we found out he had broken in through the downstairs window, slipped the lock, and climbed in while we were all distracted. I was taken to the hospital just to make sure I was okay. They said I had traces of some kind of sedative in my system. Nothing fatal, thank God, but enough to knock someone out. To this day, we never found out who he was. Never figured out why he chose my window. Never knew what he planned to do once I was unconscious. And that's the part that haunts me the most. There's this unspoken rule out in the mountains when it comes to winter storms. If someone knocks on your cabin door in the middle of a blizzard, cold, lost, desperate, you let them in. No questions asked. It's just basic human decency. In the mountains, the weather can kill, and sometimes kindness is the only thing keeping a person alive. That night, I was the one seeking that kindness. I'd gone up into the mountains for a long solo hunting weekend. It was supposed to be clear skies and calm temperatures, but the forecast lied. What started as a crisp, sunny morning turned into a blackened sky by late afternoon, and by sundown, I was smack in the middle of a blizzard. Visibility, gone. Trail markers, buried. And my little hunting cabin, the one I'd rented just a couple miles down the slope, I had no clue where it was anymore. I'd gotten turned around chasing hares and snowshoe prints, and now I was just lost. It was probably around 8 p.m. when I stumbled across the cabin. It looked like something out of an old folk tale. Tucked between a ring of tall trees, snow building up on the roof, no lights in the windows. For a second, I wasn't even sure it was real. But when I walked up and saw the woodpile by the porch and the empty rocking chair half buried in snow, I knew it was occupied, or at least had been recently. I climbed the steps and knocked. Hard. The wind howled behind me. No answer. I knocked again, pounding this time. My gloves were soaked through, and I could barely feel my fingers. Finally, I heard it. Footsteps from the other side of the door. Slow. Deliberate. Then a voice. "Come in," it said. "Leave your boots by the door." The voice wasn't loud or aggressive. It wasn't even particularly strange. But there was something flat about it, like it lacked tone. Just neutral. I waited a moment, expecting the door to swing open. But it didn't, so I pushed it open myself. The inside of the cabin was nearly pitch black, lit only by 2 candles, one on the small kitchen table, and one sitting on top of a dresser near the back wall. The air was warm, but smelled of dust, old wood, and something slightly metallic I couldn't place. To my left was a couch. In front of me was an armchair, and in the far corner, barely visible in the flickering candlelight, stood a man, just standing there, silent. His body was half shrouded in shadow, but I could make out the general shape of him. Average height, thin build, no coat, just what looked like a plain shirt and jeans. The light didn't reach his face. "Thanks for letting me in," I said, stepping inside and shutting the door behind me. "I got lost hunting, and the storm came in quick. I was lucky to find your place." He didn't reply. Instead, he pointed to the couch. "You can sleep there." His voice came again. Same flat tone. I hesitated, then dropped my bag and walked over to the couch. I sat down, brushing snow off my sleeves, and started untying my boots. "You sure it's all right?" I asked, trying to gauge if I was overstaying my welcome. No answer. He didn't move, just stood there. The room felt heavy, like the air was thick. I told myself maybe he was just a weird loner. Some backwoods guy who didn't talk much. I mean, people go up to these mountain cabins to get away from others, right? "All right," I mumbled. "I'll just get some sleep." I laid back, using my coat as a blanket, and closed my eyes. But I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. Not just weird, but off. You ever feel that? That sixth sense? Like you're not alone even when you are? I kept my eyes closed for a while, listening for footsteps, hoping I'd hear him walk into another room. But I didn't, so I opened my eyes, and he was still there, standing in the exact same spot. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. The candlelight flickered just enough to catch the outline of his face, and I swear to God what I saw made my skin crawl. His skin was pale, like sickly pale, unnatural, and he was just staring at me, not blinking, not moving. I turned over quickly, pretending I didn't see. Tried to convince myself I was just tired, freaking myself out. But 10 minutes later, I had to look again. He was closer. Not by a lot, just a few feet, but definitely closer. Still standing. Still watching. I didn't say a word. I just slowly sat up, grabbed my backpack, and stood. "Hey man," I said carefully. "Thanks again, but I think I'm gonna head out. Maybe try to find a ranger post or something." He didn't respond. Didn't move. I backed toward the door, slipped my boots on, and left. As soon as I was outside, I ran. No idea where I was going, but I had to get away from that place. The snow was deep, up to my knees, but I just kept going, slipping and stumbling down the hill. After about 10 minutes of fighting through the wind and whiteout, I saw it. Another cabin. This one had lights on, smoke coming out of the chimney. I nearly cried. I ran up, banged on the door, and practically fell inside when it opened. An older man and his wife were there, mid-60s maybe, eyes wide with concern. "Jesus, son, get in here. You're soaked." They wrapped me in blankets, made me tea, and sat me on the couch while I tried to catch my breath. Once I was warm enough to talk, I told them everything. About the other cabin, the man standing still, his pale face, the silence, how I had to leave. The old man glanced at his wife, then back at me. "Which cabin was it?" he asked. I described it as best I could. The circle of trees. The direction I came from. He frowned. "That cabin's been empty for 2 years," his wife said softly.
Ist der hier?
She nodded slowly. "You sure that's the one?" "Positive," I said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The man who owned it was murdered there. They never found who did it. And no one's lived in that place since." I didn't say anything. Just sat there, holding my tea, my hands trembling. 'Cause now I wasn't sure what was worse. That I had stayed in a cabin with a killer? Or that I had stayed in a cabin with someone who wasn't alive anymore. Blizzards can play tricks on the mind. They turn familiar streets into unrecognizable white voids, blur the lines between memory and imagination, and smother everything under a deafening silence that isn't quite natural. You start to question the things you see, or think you see, and if you're out there too long, you might come back changed, or not come back at all. I grew up in northern Minnesota. Winters up there aren't just cold, they're vicious. Wind chills that can bite through triple layers. Ice so thick it eats car tires for breakfast. But for folks like us, snow wasn't something to fear. It was just part of life. You bundled up, you got on with it. I was 19 the winter this happened. Old enough to think I knew everything, young enough to believe nothing bad could ever really happen to me. My buddy Ethan and I had been planning a snowmobile trip for weeks. We had 2 ski-doos, heavy-duty gear, and a mapped-out loop through some of the old wooded trails that skirted Lake Itasca. It was going to be a full 2-day ride. Pack light, camp once, and loop back before the weekend storm rolled in. But of course, the storm didn't wait. We should have known better. We left early Saturday morning. First, the sky was blue. Cold, sure, but peaceful. That biting kind of air that wakes you up and makes you feel alive. The engines purred beneath us as we carved through fresh powder. And for the first half of the day, it was everything we'd hoped for. But by afternoon, the sky had turned gray. And not just gray mean, like the kind of sky that presses down on you heavy and low. The wind kicked up out of nowhere, howling through the trees, and the snow started falling sideways.
Tick, fast, disorienting.
Visibility dropped from a few miles to a few yards in under an hour. We were still about 25 miles from the closest trail exit. "Dude, we need to turn around," Ethan shouted through the wind, pulling his balaclava down just enough for me to hear. But when I looked at our GPS, the signal was already fading. The cold had drained more than half the battery. The storm had hit early, hard, and fast. Still, we agreed we needed shelter. Not a tent. Not the woods. We needed a roof. That's when we remembered the ranger shack. Old, abandoned, tucked about 5 miles east of where we were. Maybe 6 if the snowdrifts were bad. It was built decades ago for Firewatch crews, and while it wasn't in use anymore, it was still standing. Supposedly. We veered off the main path and followed Ethan's lead. His uncle had taken him there once as a kid, and he swore he remembered the way. For what felt like hours, we trudged on through white hell. Our headlights barely cut through the swirling snow. Trees bent sideways under the wind. And just when I was starting to doubt him, Ethan pointed. "There!" And sure enough, through the snow, a dark silhouette began to take shape. A small wooden cabin no bigger than a shed. But with 4 walls, a roof, and a chimney, it looked like paradise. We parked the sleds under a pine tree, grabbed our gear, and waded through waist-high snow to the front door. Creaked open with a groan. Inside it was freezing but dry. A wood stove sat in the corner, and a pile of split logs, old but still usable, lay stacked against the far wall. We got a fire going. Our fingers were so numb we could barely strike the match, but once the flame caught, the warmth spread fast. We hung up our soaked gear, cooked up some instant soup, and by nightfall the storm was still raging, but we felt safe. At least for a little while. There were 2 cots pushed against opposite walls, and after talking and laughing for a bit, we both started to doze off. I don't know what time it was when I first woke up, but I remember why. It was the sound. Not wind. Not the creak of settling wood. It was knocking. 3 slow knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. At first, I thought maybe Ethan had gotten up and was messing with me. But when I sat up, I saw him. Still in his cot, wrapped in his sleeping bag, eyes wide open. "You heard that too?" I whispered. He nodded. The knocks came again. This time harder. Bang, bang, bang. "Probably just some other rider," I said. "Someone caught in the storm." But deep down, I didn't believe that. No one else was supposed to be out here. Not on this trail. Not in this weather. We stayed quiet, waiting. The knocking stopped. We crept to the door. Ethan had grabbed the hatchet from the firewood pile. I had my hunting knife. When we opened the door, there was no one there.
No footsteps. No snow disturbed.
Just the wind howling across a blank white yard. We shut the door and locked it. We didn't speak for a while. Eventually, we both drifted back to sleep, fire crackling beside us. But it didn't end there. I woke up again sometime later, feeling watched. You ever get that sensation? Like someone standing over you, just outside your line of sight? I sat up slowly and looked across the room. There, in the window, was a face. Pale, grayish, almost featureless. No breath on the glass.
No steam.
Just watching. I couldn't move. Ethan, I whispered. Look. He sat up, turned toward the window, and the face was gone. We both bolted to the window, swung the shutter open. Nothing.
No footprints.
No figure. But the window, it had fingertip smears across the glass. 5 long streaks like someone had dragged their hand across it while peering in. We barely slept after that. We stoked the fire, sat with our backs to the walls, blades in hand, waiting for the storm to pass or for morning to come, whichever came first. By sunrise, the wind had died down. The snow had finally stopped. We packed our gear in silence, not saying a word about what happened. But as we stepped outside to unbury the snowmobiles, Ethan froze. Dude, he said, you see that? Behind the cabin, etched into the snow, were footprints. But they didn't walk to the cabin. They came from the woods, circled the shack, and vanished back into the trees. Later that week, after we got home, Ethan told his uncle about it. His uncle looked pale, then pulled out a dusty old box of clippings. There, in a yellowed article from 1979, was a story about a park ranger who had frozen to death outside that same shack. Got caught in a storm while returning from patrol. They found his body leaning against the front door, fists bloody from knocking. But the ranger on duty inside, he swore he never heard a thing. They say snow quiets everything, that it softens the world, buries sound, and wraps neighborhoods in a kind of peaceful hush. And that's mostly true until something breaks the silence. Something wrong. It was late January when this happened. The kind of Midwest snowstorm that shut down entire counties. Whiteout conditions. Foot after foot piling up overnight. My family was prepared for it. We always were. My dad was the kind of guy who kept flashlights in every room, batteries for everything, backup kerosene heaters just in case. We had canned food, salt, a generator, everything. We were one of the few houses on the block that never really lost power during storms. But that night, none of that mattered, because what came for us didn't care about the lights. Started around 9 p.m. I was downstairs in the basement rec room, playing a game on my console, snow slapping the window well beside me. The wind howled through the neighborhood, making the house creak and groan. But I'd grown up with that sound. It didn't bother me. In fact, it kind of felt like home. Upstairs, my parents were watching TV. My little sister, Lily, was asleep in her room. Everything was normal, cozy, even, until I heard the scratching. At first, I thought it was just snow or maybe a branch tapping the side of the house. But it didn't stop. It was light, rhythmic, and definitely coming from inside the wall. Near the laundry room. Now, we had mice once before. I figured maybe they were back, so I paused the game and went to check it out. I turned on the laundry room light, nothing. Opened the cupboard under the sink. Empty. I leaned my ear toward the far wall, where the crawlspace access was hidden behind an old shelf. That's when it stopped. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to nothing but my own breath. Then, loud and sudden, 3 knocks slammed against the wall from the inside. I jumped back, heart hammering. My first thought? Some animal got in, maybe a raccoon or a stray cat. I ran upstairs to tell my dad. He followed me down, toolbox in hand, always the fixer. We moved the shelf, unscrewed the access panel, and opened it up. "Give me the flashlight," he said. I handed it to him, and he shined it into the crawl space. We expected to see insulation, maybe some paw prints. But what we saw?
Boot prints.
Human boot prints. Fresh. In the dust, clear as day, were the marks of someone crawling through. Bent low, moving slowly, deliberately. My dad froze. He didn't say a word. just handed me the flashlight, went upstairs and locked every door and window in the house. He called the non-emergency police line, explained what we found, and they promised to send someone over within the hour. But the storm was bad, and an hour is a long time when you know someone might be inside your house. My dad and I stood in the living room, eyes on the hallway that led to the basement, while my mom stayed with Lily upstairs, door locked, phone in hand. We waited. 15 minutes later, we heard something. Thump, 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 like someone knocking softly on the floorboards underneath us. The crawl space ran under the whole house. My dad motioned for me to stay put. He grabbed the crowbar from the garage and crept down the stairs. I followed quietly. We opened the laundry room door again and shined the light into the crawl space. Nothing. The prints were still there, but they hadn't moved. Yet, then we heard a voice. A low, whispery voice that drifted out from the darkness. "Let me in." We both froze. It didn't sound angry. It didn't sound loud. It sounded pleading. "Let me in. It's so cold." My dad, whose hands never shook, was trembling now. He dropped the flashlight. I grabbed it, fumbled to keep the beam steady, and that's when we saw him. At the far end of the crawl space, maybe 20 feet away, was a man. Or something that looked like a man. He was crawling slowly toward us. His clothes were tattered. His skin was pale, almost blue. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, lips cracked. But the worst part? He was smiling. A wide, unnatural grin stretched across his face as he dragged himself forward. "We have to help him," I whispered. But my dad didn't move. "No," he said. "That's not a person." I didn't understand what he meant until I looked closer. The man's fingers, they weren't moving right. They curled in strange ways, like they were jointed backward. And his eyes, those weren't human eyes. They didn't reflect the light. They absorbed it. Hollow. Empty. That was no stranded hiker. That was no lost soul. That was something else. We slammed the panel shut, screwed it in tight, and shoved the shelf back in place. My dad piled weights and boxes against it. Just then, the power flickered and died. The house went black. Only the storm outside lit the windows now. My dad handed me a flashlight and told me to stay with Mom and Lily. He took the crowbar and stood guard by the panel. Upstairs, my mom was panicking. I told her what we saw, and she believed me because she saw it too. When she looked out the bedroom window, she saw someone standing in our backyard. No coat, no shoes, just skin. He was staring up at her window. She backed away, pulled the curtain, and called 911 again, this time demanding they send someone immediately. They promised help was on the way. But the storm had knocked out a dozen roads. It would take time. Too much time. That night, we didn't sleep. We took turns keeping watch. At one point, I thought I heard movement in the attic too, like dragging. By dawn, the power returned. The snow had stopped. 2 officers showed up, rifles in hand. They swept the crawl space and the attic. But they didn't find anyone. What they did find: a torn piece of cloth wedged between the boards under the house. It was old, decades old, moldy, like something that had been buried and dug up. Later, my dad went to the local records office. Just curiosity, he said. What he found chilled us. Our house was built over what used to be the property line for an old 1930s sanatorium. Part of the facility burned down in the 50s during a brutal winter storm. Several patients died in the fire. One of them rumored to have escaped into the woods before succumbing to the cold. They say he used to whisper through vents, calling out to others, begging them to let him in. We moved a year later. I've never lived in a house with a crawl space since, and I never will. You ever stay somewhere that feels wrong? I'm not talking about a place that's run down or outdated. I'm talking about that gut-deep, primal warning that tells you something about this place isn't safe. You don't know why. You can't explain it, but it sticks to you. That's what this motel was. It happened in 2020. My girlfriend at the time, Sarah, and I were taking a winter road trip from Oregon to Montana to visit my sister. We had everything planned out: routes, stops, hotels. We checked the weather obsessively and knew a big storm was coming, but we thought we could beat it. Make it to the next town before it got bad. We were wrong. That stretch of highway between Spokane and Missoula? When a blizzard hits, it hits. Whiteout. Zero visibility. 1 minute it's fine, and the next you can't see past your headlights. We made it maybe an hour past Spokane before we knew we couldn't drive any farther. So we pulled off at the next exit, one of those no-name towns. A gas station, 2 diners, a boarded-up hardware store, and a motel. The Sleepy Pines Motor Inn. Even the name felt ironic. The sign was cracked and flickering, half buried in snow, like it hadn't been updated since 1979. But we were out of options. The snow was piling up, the wind was shrieking, and we couldn't drive another inch. We pulled into the parking lot. Only 2 other cars sat there, both covered in fresh powder. The whole place looked like it hadn't had more than 3 guests in a week. Inside the office, a little bell jingled as we stepped in. It smelled like stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. At the desk was a guy, late 50s, bald, wearing a stained t-shirt and reading a paperback mystery novel. He looked up like he'd just woken from a nap. "Need a room?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just for the night. Snow's pretty bad." He nodded slowly and slid a key across the counter. Not a card. A key. Brass with a plastic tag that read room 6. "Checkout's at 10, he mumbled. "Don't lose the key." That was it.
No signature.
No ID. Just cash. It was strange, but again, we were desperate. We parked in front of room 6 and lugged our bags inside. The room was small, smelled faintly of mildew, and had this faded brown carpet that felt damp no matter where you stepped. A queen bed, a dresser with a TV that only got 2 static-filled channels, and a little window that faced the back alley. Still, it was warm, and at that point, that's all we needed. We ordered takeout from one of the 2 diners down the street, ate in bed, and tried to make the best of it. The storm outside raged on, hammering the windows, burying the car. By 9 p.m., the whole motel was wrapped in a blanket of snow and silence. That's when things started to get weird. We were watching a movie on Sarah's laptop when we heard it. Footsteps. Not from above. Not in the hallway. From inside the wall. It was subtle at first, like soft thumps behind the headboard, but they moved back and forth like someone pacing behind the drywall. We both froze. "What the hell is that?" Sarah whispered. I pressed my ear to the wall. The footsteps stopped. Then a scratch. A long, slow scraping sound, like nails dragging along the inside of the sheetrock. I stood up and knocked on the wall. Hard. Nothing. We brushed it off. Maybe pipes. Maybe an animal. Old buildings make noises, right? But an hour later, Sarah was asleep, and I was still wide awake. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And then, I heard the doorknob jiggle. Just once. Not violently. Not like someone trying to break in. Just a soft rattle, like someone testing it. I sat up straight and whispered Sarah's name. She stirred, groggy. "What?" "Shoo," I said. "Listen." We both stayed silent. Nothing. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. No one. But then I noticed something. Under the door, on the carpet, was a shadow. Someone was standing there. Right on the other side. Not moving. Not knocking. Just standing. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. "Call the front desk," I whispered. Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed the motel office. The phone rang and rang and rang, then cut to voicemail. We waited. Eventually, the shadow moved. We heard soft footsteps crunching through the snow, then silence. I opened the door quickly, hoping to catch someone. But the hallway was empty. No footprints in the snow. No sign of anyone. Just cold air rushing in. We shoved a chair under the doorknob and didn't sleep much after that. Around 3 a.m. we both heard it again, the scratching. But this time it wasn't in the wall. It was in the bathroom. I opened the door slowly. The light flicked on, buzzing like it hadn't been used in a while. And on the mirror were handprints, foggy, smudged, like someone had been standing in front of it, breathing heavily. But the room was ice cold. We hadn't taken showers. The heat hadn't been on in there. There was no reason for that mirror to be fogged up. I wiped it clean and stared at myself for a moment, trying to rationalize it. But deep down, I didn't believe the rational explanation anymore. We packed our stuff before sunrise. Didn't even wait for the snowplows. Just dug the car out as best we could and started driving, crawling at 10 miles per hour until we hit the next town. We never checked out. Didn't even drop off the key. A few weeks later, I tried looking up the Sleepy Pines motor in online. Couldn't find it. No website.
No listing.
No reviews. Like it had never existed. Eventually, I found a forum post from 5 years earlier. A guy warning travelers not to stop at a motel outside Spokane that looked open but wasn't. He said the rooms were unlocked. The office was empty. The lights stayed on at night, but no one was ever really there. He stayed one night. He said he heard footsteps inside his closet and a voice whispering his name from the vent. He left at dawn. The post ended with, "If you see the sign for Sleepy Pines, keep driving." There's a stretch of road out in the countryside where cell service dies. The trees grow too close, and the snow never melts, not really. Locals call it Hollow Ridge. It's not on most maps, and even GPS apps get confused once you're a few miles in. That's why people avoid it, especially in winter. But I didn't know that at the time. This happened when I was 22. I was working a freelance gig that had me driving through rural Pennsylvania during one of the worst snowstorms of the season. It was supposed to be a quick job, deliver some photography equipment, stay overnight, and head home. I planned my route carefully, or so I thought. Somewhere along the way, my usual road was closed due to a wreck, and my GPS rerouted me through some back roads. That's how I ended up on Hollow Ridge. It was just after 6 p.m. when the snow really picked up. Visibility dropped fast. I had my wipers on full speed, high beams cutting through thick flurries, tires crunching through half-packed snow. The trees were dense and leaned in like they were trying to block out the last bits of daylight. I started feeling watched. Like every time I rounded a bend, something unseen was waiting. But I kept driving. Then the car died. No warning.
No spattering.
Just dead. The dashboard flickered. The heater clicked off. And my little sedan rolled to a quiet stop in the middle of nowhere. I turned the key. Nothing. The silence was deafening. I checked my phone. No bars. Not even emergency signal. I sat there for a while, hoping it would come back on. Didn't. The wind picked up. The temperature started dropping fast. I couldn't stay in the car all night. I'd freeze. So I did the only thing I could do. I got out and started walking. There was a slight incline up ahead, and beyond it, a clearing. And in the middle of that clearing, a house. It looked abandoned at first. The paint was peeling. One of the upstairs windows was cracked. But the porch light was on. Just barely. Like it hadn't been replaced in years. I made my way up the steps and knocked. No answer. But the door creaked open. "Hello," I called out, stepping inside. "My car broke down. I just need to use a phone." No response. The interior was dimly lit. Dusty. But warm. The fireplace was burning. Low and steady. Like someone had just stoked it. That should have been my cue to get out. But I was cold, exhausted, and desperate. So I stepped in and closed the door. The living room was small but clean, too clean. No photos, no clutter, just furniture, bookshelves, and a large grandfather clock in the corner, ticking quietly. I sat down near the fire, rubbing my hands together. And that's when I saw her, a little girl, standing in the hallway, halfway hidden in shadow. She wore an old-fashioned dress, lace collar, dusty pink fabric, scuffed shoes. Her hair was long, dark, unbrushed, and her face was blank. Not frightened, not curious, just empty. I stood up quickly. "Hey there," I said. "Is your mom or dad home?" She didn't answer, just stared. I took a step forward and she vanished around the corner. I followed cautiously. The hallway led to a kitchen, equally empty. Then a staircase. "Hello," I called again. No response. I should have left right then. But I didn't. Instead, I explored. Upstairs, I found 3 bedrooms. All of them looked like they'd been frozen in time. Beds made but dusty. Closets filled with clothes no one had worn in decades. One room had toys on the floor, a dollhouse, a spinning top, an old teddy bear missing an eye. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. From the floor above me. But there was no floor above me. The ceiling was flat. The attic hatch was shut. No stairs leading higher. The footsteps circled directly over my head. Slow. Deliberate. Then silence. I backed out of the room, heart pounding, and went back downstairs. The fire had gone out. The living room was cold now, bitter cold. And the grandfather clock? It had stopped ticking. His hands were stuck at 3:33. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. I sat down in the same chair, trying to calm myself. Maybe I'd fallen asleep. Maybe I'd imagined the girl. The footsteps, the freezing air. Then I saw the door. Not the front door, the basement door. It was slightly open now. Just a crack. I swear it had been closed when I came in. From the other side came a soft sound. Scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. Then, faintly, a whisper. "Help me." I stood. Every muscle in my body screamed, "Leave now." I walked to the door and shut it. Firmly. Then I grabbed my bag and bolted out the front door into the snow. My car was still dead, but I didn't care. I just started walking. I didn't even look back. Eventually, after about 2 miles, I saw headlights. A snowplow driver had pulled off to fix his chains and saw me stumbling out of the woods. He helped me into the truck, gave me coffee, and called a tow for my car. I asked him about the house. He went quiet. "You were on Hollow Ridge," he said. "Ain't nobody lived in that house for 40 years. I told him what I saw. The girl. The fireplace. The footsteps. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "That place. It shows up when it wants to." He said folks in the area called it the Hungry House. Said people who tried to stay the night either didn't wake up or came back changed, quiet, pale, hollow. The old house burned down in the 1980s during a winter storm. Family of 4. Only the little girl's body was never found. Every few years, someone stumbles onto it again, just like I did. And every time, it looks just a little bit newer. You ever hear your tires crunch over something in the snow? And you know it wasn't just a branch or a rock. That feeling of your whole body tensing, your foot freezing above the brake pedal, and your stomach telling you hit something, even though you didn't see anything? Yeah. That happened to me once. And I wish I'd just kept driving. It was last February, and I was making the long drive from Denver to Cheyenne to visit my uncle. We'd had a week of sun, but then, bam! Mother Nature decided she wasn't done. I was already halfway there when the flakes started falling. Fast. Thick. The kind of snow that makes it look like your headlights are cutting through TV static. I pulled over at a rest stop to check my GPS. It told me to stay on Route 287 the whole way, but traffic was crawling and the snowplows were behind. So I took a side road, a detour I didn't recognize, but the GPS said it'd shave off 30 minutes. Spoiler alert, it didn't. This road was tight, winding, and lined with nothing but bare trees. No houses, no power lines, no signs, just white. I was doing maybe 30 miles an hour when I felt it. Thump. I swerved slightly, slammed the brakes, and came to a sliding stop. My heart was in my throat. I looked in the rear view. Nothing. But the car definitely hit something. I got out. The snow was falling sideways, wind screaming, but I didn't see any animal.
No debris.
No dent. But behind the car were footprints. Human, bare feet, leading from the woods to the road, and then gone. I don't mean they kept going across the road. I mean they just stopped, like whoever it was had been standing there in the road when I hit them, and then vanished. I stood there for a long moment, staring into the trees. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a deer, standing between two birch trunks. Tall, still, but then it moved wrong. Too fast, too smooth. It stepped behind a tree, and then didn't come out the other side. I got back in the car and locked the doors. The GPS froze. The screen just blinked, then rebooted. No signal. Of course. I drove on, slower now, gripping the wheel hard enough to hurt. My eyes scanned the road, the trees, the mirrors. Every time the wind blew, I swore I saw something move. About 10 minutes later, I came across a cabin. It was off the road, maybe 100 yards into the woods. Just a silhouette at first, but as I drove closer, I saw it more clearly. Wooden, one-story, chimney smoking. I pulled into the snow-packed driveway. I don't know why. Something about the place felt safe. I knocked. A man opened the door. Mid-60s, gray beard, wearing flannel and thermal pants. Looked like he'd lived in that cabin for decades. "Blizzard caught you, huh?" he said. I nodded. My GPS cut out. "Roads are bad." He motioned me inside. "Come on. Can't have you freezing out there." I stepped into warmth and firelight. The cabin smelled like cedar and old books. Cozy, rustic, the kind of place you see on postcards. He gave me coffee, sat me by the fire, and asked where I was headed. I told him Cheyenne. He frowned. "You're way off track." He pulled out an old paper map, pointed to where we were, and yeah, he was right. The GPS had routed me deep into the backwoods. "Can I wait here until it clears a bit?" I asked. "Course," he said. The man introduced himself as Walter. Said he was a retired park ranger, lived out here year-round. We talked for a while. He told me about blizzards past, wolves he'd seen, tourists who got lost out here and didn't come back. "Place has a pull to it," he said. I asked him what he meant. He just shrugged. After a while, he stood up and said he was going to get more firewood from the shed. I offered to help, but he shook his head. "You stay warm. I'll be back in a minute." He stepped out into the snow. I waited and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, I got up and looked out the window. The shed was maybe 30 feet from the cabin, but Walter wasn't there. The door was swinging open in the wind. Empty. I stepped outside. "Walter," I called. No answer. I walked to the shed. Inside, the firewood was stacked neatly. Axe on the hook. No footprints in the fresh snow. It's like he never even came in. I turned back to the cabin, and that's when I saw it. In the trees. A shape. Human but not. Too tall. Arms too long. Head cocked sideways like it was listening. It wasn't Walter. And it wasn't walking. It was gliding. Silent. Straight toward the cabin. I ran. Bolted inside. Locked the door. And grabbed the poker from the fireplace. Whatever it was, man, creature, thing, it stopped just at the edge of the clearing. I could see it through the window backlit by the moon. Watching. Waiting. I didn't sleep. By morning, the thing was gone. So was Walter. No sign of struggle. No tracks.
No trace.
I left as soon as the snow let up. Eventually, I hit a plowed road and made it to a gas station. The clerk asked where I was coming from. I told him about the cabin, about Walter. His face went white. There ain't been a ranger out there in years, he said. Cabin burned down in '98. Then what did I? He just shook his head. You should be glad you got out. I've tried finding that road again. Tried mapping it. Searching for any mention of Walter. Nothing. All I know is something's out there. Something that pretends to be human. That lures people off the road. Into the snow. And if you hear your tires hit something you didn't see, don't stop. Just keep driving. When you grow up in a small town surrounded by mountains, you get used to winter swallowing everything. You know which roads to avoid, how to drive on black ice, and how to dig out your front door without losing feeling in your hands. But nothing prepares you for the kind of storm that shuts down time, that buries homes in silence, that makes even the sound of your own heartbeat feel intrusive. This happened in early January, a couple years ago, during what the local news called a once-in-a-generation blizzard. I was visiting my cousin Tyler up in Idaho, in a town that didn't even have a Walmart. He had a little log house up near the tree line, gorgeous place but totally isolated. The forecast said the storm wouldn't hit until late Sunday, so we figured we had time. We didn't. Came early and fast. Within an hour, we were completely snowed in. The kind of snow that doesn't fall, it slams. Wind gusts rattled the windows. The power flickered every 5 minutes, and the generator backup only worked in short bursts. We kept it together the first night, lit a fire, told old stories, ate canned soup and played cards by lantern light. Honestly, it was kind of peaceful, until we noticed the sound. At first, we thought it was the wind, a low, rhythmic knocking, but it wasn't at the door. It was beneath the floorboards. We paused, listening. The knock came again. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. Like a pattern. I joked. Maybe we've got a snow goblin living under the house. Tyler didn't laugh. His face was pale. Eyes wide. You hear that too? We checked the basement. Nothing. No sign of rodents or pipes banging. Just cold air and stacked firewood. We went back upstairs and tried to forget about it. But then came the footprints. Tyler was the first to see them the next morning. A set of barefoot tracks. In the snow, leading from the forest to our front porch. No return prints. Just one set. As if someone came to our door. And never left. He called the local sheriff's line, but it went straight to voicemail. The storm had knocked out communications. We were on our own. That night, the knocking returned. This time closer. Not under the house. Inside the walls. We tore the place apart, thinking we'd find some animal had gotten in. But there was nothing.
No nests. No scratches. No droppings.
Just silence. And the footprints came back again. This time at the back door. Still barefoot. Still no return trail. And this time smaller. Like a child's. By day 3, we stopped sleeping. We boarded up the windows. Kept the fireplace roaring. Held tools in our hands even when we sat down to eat. Tyler was starting to lose it. He said he'd seen someone. A girl. Standing in the hallway outside his bedroom in the middle of the night. He said she was pale, wearing a nightgown.
No shoes.
And that she whispered something he couldn't understand. I didn't believe him. Not really. Until I saw her too. That 4th night, I woke up freezing. The fire had gone out. I went to restart it, and she was there. Sitting in the armchair by the hearth. Just sitting. Her back was to me. I called out, thinking it was a hallucination or dream. She didn't move. But when I stepped closer, I saw the snow. It was falling inside the house. Lightly. like dust, and there near her feet were fresh tracks, wet, barefoot, leading into the room. I blinked, and she was gone. The snow melted instantly. We tried to leave the next day, packed up and dug out the truck. But the road was gone. I don't mean it was buried. I mean it wasn't there. Just trees. Thick, knotted pines where the road used to be. Tyler lost it. Started screaming into the woods. I know what you are. Leave us alone. And that's when we heard her. The girl's voice. From everywhere. All I want is to come home. We ran back into the house. Locked every door. Boarded every window. Then that night, silence. No wind.
No knocking. No footsteps.
Just silence so deep it felt like the world had ended. We fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. And when we woke up, everything was normal. The storm had passed. The sun was out. The road was back. We drove to town in stunned silence. We didn't say a word to anyone. Not at first. But later, we told a local friend about what happened. He nodded slowly, said he'd heard a story like that before. Back in the 70s, a little girl had wandered off during a blizzard. Got lost. Froze to death in those woods. Her parents had been searching for her. And people said they could hear her knocking at their doors during storms, asking to be let in. They say she never found her way home. And sometimes, during the worst storms, she still tries. Some stories stay buried in small towns. Whispers passed around in barbershops, church basements, and late-night poker games. They don't make the news, but everyone knows someone who was there. This is one of those stories. I was driving through upstate New York last December during a freak snowstorm. One of those flash blizzards where the weather changes in minutes. I was heading back from a client meeting and decided to cut through a lesser-known route. Route 9, a narrow road that winds through old forest towns, most of which look like they haven't changed since the 50s. The snow came down so hard my GPS glitched out. Signal dropped. And then the car started acting up, like the battery didn't like the cold. Dashboard lights flickered. The heat cut in and out. By the time I realized I needed to pull over, there weren't any gas stations or open businesses in sight. Just trees. Endless, thick, snow-laden trees. Then I saw it. A house. Off the road. Set back maybe 200 yards. White, two-story, Victorian style. It looked strangely intact compared to the empty barns and trailer homes I'd passed. There was a single porch light on. The driveway was completely cleared of snow. And that was the weird part. It was dumping snow. Had been for an hour. And yet this driveway, spotless, like someone had just cleared it. I hesitated, then pulled in. As I approached the house, something in me tightened. It wasn't fear yet, but discomfort. That ancient caveman part of your brain that whispers, turn around. But I didn't listen. I knocked on the front door. It opened before I finished the second knock. Standing there was a woman, maybe late 40s, wearing an old-fashioned house dress, her hair done up like she was expecting guests. She smiled. "Oh, you poor thing. Caught in the storm." I nodded, stumbling through an apology. She waved it off. "Come in. Warm up." Inside, the house was too warm. Not cozy. Stifling. The air smelled like cinnamon and burnt hair. There was a fireplace, roaring unnaturally hot, and candles lit in every corner of the room, even though the power was clearly on. She led me into a sitting room with floral wallpaper and plastic covers still on the furniture, like no one had touched anything in decades. "I was just making tea," she said. "You'll stay for dinner, won't you?" I tried to protest. Said I only needed to use the phone, maybe wait out the storm. But she was already gliding into the kitchen. I sat there, unsure what to do. That's when I noticed the photographs. Dozens of them. All black and white. Same house. Same living room. But the people in them weren't smiling. Weren't moving. They were all seated in that exact room. Stiff, pale. One photo centered on the mantel showed the woman herself. Younger, standing beside a man and two children. But their faces were all scratched out. I stood and moved toward the hallway, needing to use the bathroom. That's when I noticed the upstairs banister, lined with coats. Dozens of coats, all different sizes, all different eras. Some were leather bombers from the 40s. Others looked like modern ski jackets, all covered in dust. I was just about to head back into the sitting room when I heard a creak upstairs, followed by a shuffle, and then the sound of something being dragged. "Mom," I called. "Is someone else here?" No answer. I stepped into the kitchen. Empty. Teapot boiling, but no one in sight. I turned and she was there, right behind me, smiling again. "You'll be staying the night," she said. "It's not safe out there." I backed away. "Actually, I think the storm's lightening up. I'll just—" "No," she said, firmer, the smile still plastered across her face. "You're staying. I set a place for you." She pointed to the dining room. There were 3 place settings. One empty, the other 2 occupied. At the table sat a man and a child. Not moving, not blinking. They were dressed neatly, and they were dead. Skin like wax, lips sewn shut. The woman tilted her head. "They don't talk much anymore." I ran, bolted for the door, tore through the snow, leapt into my car, and turned the key. Miraculously, it started. I didn't look back. Didn't breathe until I hit the next town and found a gas station. The clerk there saw the look on my face and asked what happened. I told him everything. He went pale. "You stopped at the White House off Route 9, didn't you?" I nodded. He looked around, then leaned in. "That house burned down in 1993. Lady who lived there. She poisoned her family, kept the bodies, hosted tea parties with them every night." "What?" He nodded. "She lit the whole place up when the cops came. Been abandoned ever since." "But it was there," I insisted. "It was warm. She made tea." "She's still out there," he said, dead serious. "Whenever the snow hits just right. Folks say she reappears. Still waiting for dinner guests." I drove the long way home, and I never take Route 9 in the winter anymore.